In healthcare today, anesthesia can sometimes be treated like a box to check, a logistical requirement for surgery, instead of a critical clinical discipline that affects safety, outcomes, and patient experience. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between being part of a company where anesthesia is just another service line versus being part of an organization where anesthesia is the entire mission. This is a conversation about focus, about respect, and about what happens when clinicians are supported by leadership that truly understands what they do. Welcome to Unmasked, the CCI Anesthesia Podcast, the show where we dive deep into the world of anesthesia practice improvement, quality enhancement, and the evolving landscape of healthcare. I'm Doug Simpler, your guide on this journey as we explore the strategies, innovations, and stories that shape the future of anesthesia care. Get ready to be enlightened, inspired, and most importantly, unmasked as we unravel the many layers of the current state of anesthesia. This is Unmasked. Joining us today is Sean Bitz, Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist and Vice President of Clinical Affairs at CCI Anesthesia. Sean has served for 8 years at Union Health, including 4 as Chief CRNA, and is widely respected for his collaborative leadership style and innovative approach to patient care. Sean also serves on the board of directors for the Indiana Association of Nurse Anesthetists, actively shaping the future of the profession in his state. We're thrilled to have his voice and perspective with us today. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Doug. Happy to be here.
We're also joined by Alex Gorecki, president of CCI Anesthesia. Alex brings over 25 years of senior-level experience in healthcare leadership, organizational development, and performance improvement. Throughout his career, he has supported leadership teams across more than 300 hospitals nationwide, with a focus on strategic growth, clinician engagement, and operational excellence. We're fortunate to have his strategic viewpoint in this discussion. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate you having me here.
So let's set the stage for this conversation today. Alex, what happens when anesthesia is not a priority in a healthcare system?
So anesthesia is critical to the OR operations, and Sean will talk about the clinical aspect of that in more detail. But you have to keep in mind, whether it's a health system or a multi-specialty group that feels like they can kind of be all things to all people, you end up with this dilution of your resources and your focus. It is a definite clinical service line in and of itself. You can't have an ER doc go up and do anesthesia. That's not how they do it. That's why they go to medical school. That's why they specialize in things. And so there was a time when you could blend a lot of these together within the system and have multiple services under one umbrella. But especially with the big multi-specialty groups, it attracted private equity investors. It helped them to maybe do one service line as a loss leader a little bit. Maybe in the ER they made a huge margin, but in the anesthesia it was more subsidized. The payers now have kind of ratcheted down on reimbursement, and there's new legislation out there now on surprise billing and all that makes it a lot less attractive to do that kind of model. Even in our company, when we recruit new people to come in to be part of our practice management team, if they came out of an ER group or hospital medicine group, it takes them a few months to learn how our business works, how anesthesia works, because it doesn't always translate over like people assume that it does. And so it is a critical service line in and of itself, and hospitals have to recognize that.
Well, it all boils down to taking care of patients. And so anesthesia is a specialized field, and so the management should be specialized as well. It takes specific quality measures. It takes very specific training and a specific subset of people to match with that clinical approach as well. So when we have operational assistants within anesthesia management companies, they become very familiar with the practice of anesthesia and the support that it takes in order for anesthesia to be efficient and take care of the evolving changes of the OR.
When anesthesia is undervalued, Sean, how does it affect morale, performance, and retention?
And so we want our providers to stay with us. We want to promote retention and hold on to these high quality people as long as we can. And so culture and morale play into that. And CCI specifically is very focused on culture and maintaining high cultures within all of our practices to support that retention.
So we've established that a focus in anesthesia can have a major impact. Alex, why does CCI choose to remain anesthesia only?
Well, it's because a lot of the things Sean has alluded to, whether you're talking about the quality management piece, whether you're talking about recruiting, whether you're talking about operational efficiency and how you structure models, you have to really have a clear understanding of how that works, how you utilize a team model, anesthesiologists and CRNAs effectively within the model, how you handle callback or late rooms, whether you have post-call day off, how you handle weekends, how you handle high OB volumes. These are not kind of cookie cutter ways of doing this. Every place is unique in how it operates. And so you have to really have a firm grasp of that. And that comes from both the business side, but primarily from the clinical side. And so you have to bring those two together to say, okay, clinically, in an ideal world, we would have this. Financially, the hospital can't do it that way. So let's figure out in a more efficient way that kind of finds a common ground between both of those areas. And then in the mix of all that, you have surgeon preference, which throws a big wrench in the works because you're like, oh, we've got the perfect model. And this surgeon's like, I'm not going to do my cases at that time. I'm going to do them on this time. And so you have to balance a lot of aspects of that, keeping patient safety the primary focus the entire time. And so, anesthesia runs the full gamut of the case, all the way from pre-oping well in advance of that patient coming in, all the way to PACU on the back end to make sure the person's coming out of the anesthesia okay. And so it's important that anesthesia be focused and the people running anesthesia know what the heck they're doing, because otherwise it's just going to be like a free-for-all, and that kills efficiency, it kills patient care, and it upsets the surgeons when they can't get the coverage that they need throughout the day and get the OR time that they need.
That uniqueness of each individual site highlights the importance of our clinical leadership as well, having strong chiefs on site to facilitate what's right for the patient and what's right for the anesthesia, what's right for the OR as a whole. And so we try to focus heavily on getting that strong clinical leadership in place so that we can optimize efficiency. I'm a big fan of modeling the OR as a whole after anesthesia. And so with that mindset, we take the first strong step forward, and then the OR as a whole can fall in place in terms of how many rooms are we running. We can dive in and analyze case times and the needs of surgeons, the needs of our patients, and then model our staffing after those needs, make it make sense for the providers, for the patients, as I mentioned, as a system as a whole. And then the nurses and the techs of the OR, that can be modeled after the anesthesia, and that's just one piece of really solidifying that efficiency. Many places seem to not have that style of communication of modeling the staffing with anesthesia or the nurses and techs and whatever flavor that looks like at the specific facility. It's important to look into that and know how can we move forward in matching the two respects so that we can ultimately promote a well-oiled machine.
When it's critical too to provider retention too, having a clear understanding of how to build these models, because I've seen ER groups try to get an anesthesia and they'll build 12-hour and 24-hour shifts just like they would in the ER. Well, that doesn't work in the OR. It's too cumbersome. And then I've seen other ones that the hospital will do it, and they'll treat the CRNAs as nurses, and they'll say, well, they didn't get their 40 hours in this week, and they only worked 35, and so should we cut their pay 5 hours this week? And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. If they were 5 hours short, that means your ORs weren't running like they were supposed to. You missed 5 hours of billable revenue in your OR. You need to go talk to the surgeons and get those 5 hours up, because you want to do 40, 45, 50 hours if you can for each of your providers. If you're underutilizing them, then you're costing your hospital money. If you're overworking them because you're using an ER group model for an anesthesia model, then you're going to have turnover, burnout and turnover. And so getting it right from the provider perspective is critical as well.
And that 5 hours that Alex is mentioning, on the flip side of that, in a truly efficient model, we want the 5 extra hours. That means we're doing higher volume cases in less amount of time. That's higher efficiency. And so it expands our capacity to add more cases in. Once you're flowing efficiently and the OR is matching with anesthesia, you can get way more done. Surgeons are more satisfied. They're not sitting in between cases waiting on things to get going. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We want patients to be taken care of to the top tier, of course. That's always number one. But number two, let's do it in a way that makes sense for everybody, and then we can all get home to our families.
What is the impact to patient care when you have a more singular focus like this? We've talked a lot about the operational impact, but we haven't talked a lot about the patient. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of patient care.
Yeah, so that's why we're all here. We want to take care of patients to the absolute best ability that we can. And so having a dedicated anesthesia service that isn't focused on funneling resources to every other specialty, all resources can go directly to the anesthesia from the anesthesia management company. One way to build that out is having clinical leaders. So having someone on site overseeing exactly how the OR operates, how the anesthesia providers are performing in terms of quality and efficiency. It makes a huge difference to patients to ensure that their outcomes are optimized.
I would say too, it's having a fine-tuned machine, well-oiled machine working not only helps the surgeons have a happier day with moving patients through, but it helps the patients move through quicker too. They've done all this prep work to come there. Their family's waiting in the OR or waiting outside the OR for them to get in. You don't want a 1-hour procedure to take 2 or 3 hours because people didn't have their act together. And then also talking about patient outcomes, if you have a good team model where maybe it's orthopedic cases and you have the anesthesiologist doing blocks, regional blocks and prep for those cases, then you have the CRNA actually doing the case in the room with the surgeon. It makes things work a lot better. The patient, because they got a regional block, instead of being fully sedated heavily for a case that they didn't need that much sedation for, they come out of the anesthesia better in the PACU. They feel better at the end of the day. It's good for the hospital because their patient satisfaction scores look good because I'm a happy patient. I'm not groggy all day. And I don't have any pain because that block is still set for the next 3 days or however long it lasts. So it's good for the patient from that perspective too.
That hits the nail on the head, with patient outcomes and experience. You could see so many practices that might not be optimizing regional blocks. And the question is why? Well, that can be multifaceted. Maybe they're not familiar. Maybe they don't have the time to learn it. Maybe they're not comfortable or have the resources available that they feel to do that safely. And so focusing on those specific anesthesia modalities and techniques allows us to essentially enhance the patient experience. As Alex said, they wake up more comfortable, ready to go home. It enhances recovery and healing, encompasses the full patient into the process.
Sean, what does it feel like clinically when leadership truly understands anesthesia?
Yeah, it makes all the difference for morale. Essentially, if we need support, we, as clinical providers and leaders, we talk to the full team and we find a way to make it happen. It's really not even a question. If it's a proven way to make us better for our patients and for our communities, we're going to do it. And so that's makes all the difference to know that what we're doing is important. They highlight that by understanding our role and by supporting it.
And we are their advocate with administration. I mean, we're there. The hospital's the customer, the client, but the provider's our customer too when we're doing this. And so when they come to us and say, look, we're having burnout. We're getting called back a lot at night. And the next morning is tough to come back in. If you've had to come in at 2 a.m. and you're there till 4 a.m. and then you're supposed to be back there at 7 a.m., it's too much. And so we'll say, okay, let's build in for example, a post-call day off to give people a chance to decompress. And we'll look at those hours and we'll say, look, we have a surgeon that's routinely starting late in the day. We're all here at 7 in the morning. This guy's rolling in at 10 in the morning and go until 6 or 7 at night when everybody else is wrapping up at 3. And so we'll gather that data. We'll gather, how many hours people are working, and we'll go to administration with that and say, look, this is what's happening. So if you want to keep accommodating the surgeon, that's fine, but we're going to need a late shift, or we're going to need a post-call day off, or we're going to need these different things. We use data. We use our business negotiations with administration to kind of advocate on behalf of the providers to create a better model for them that's more sustainable. Not that it's easier, it's just appropriate and sustainable to prevent that burnout long term.
A lot of time these multi-service groups are also backed by private equity. Alex, what's lost in a multi-service P-owned model?
Well, you end up spreading your resources too thin. You have a lot of times they think, okay, if this group over here manages a hospitalist program somewhere, then they can do anesthesia too. It's clinical, it's doctors. What's the difference? And it's certainly not the same. And so you end up diluting your focus on those areas, diluting your expertise in those areas, and then you eventually figure out, I don't know what I'm doing here, and the whole thing falls apart. And meanwhile, patients are suffering because of it. The surgeons are unhappy, and at that point, it's too late, and the damage is done. And now you're trying to mop things up, because whether it's clinical quality, whether it's drug diversion, whether it's just operational efficiency, starting on time in the mornings, because they have to look. It's not like, okay, from the ER example, patients are just coming in all day. They're coming in, you're reacting, you're dealing with those things. In the OR, we have a schedule, right? And if anesthesia is routinely late, starting the day, it throws the whole day off. Meanwhile, you've got patients, like I said earlier, they prepped for that, their families are waiting for them, and now, okay, my 10 a.m. procedure is now going to happen at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because the whole morning got off because something didn't go right with anesthesia. And when the OR director picks up the phone to call a practice manager that's over that group, the person doesn't know what to do because they don't understand why they were late either, what happened there. And sometimes it's the surgeon, sometimes it's a variety of factors. Maybe the patient wasn't ready. But if you don't understand that environment, you don't know how to deal with that and resolve that so it doesn't happen again. And so they end up being masters of nothing at that point because they're just trying to appeal to private equity groups that'll say, okay, man, you do ER, hospitalists, radiology, anesthesia, you're doing all OBGYN, you're doing everything. I'm going to buy that group because we can take that whole model and bring it to a hospital and be everything for that hospital. Well, it sounds good academically, but it's not there anymore, especially on the reimbursement side. They've ratcheted down so much, the payers have, on reimbursement. The surprise billing legislation stopped a lot of the revenue that the private equity-backed groups were getting. They were dropping huge bills to these patients, and the patient is threatened with going to collections if they don't pay up this money, and it put people in a difficult position. And so that's all stopped, and so a lot of the money they had coming in has dried up. And so it's less appealing for the private equity guys at this point to be into those most multi-specialty groups, which makes it less appealing for a company to be multi-specialty at this point.
And from a provider standpoint of that, it's not always easy to jump out of bed in the middle of the night and go in for a case. And there's always the aspect of, oh, does this really need done right now? And all of that set aside, we take care of patients. We do that first. And then if we need to look retrospectively of does it need to be, or did it need to be done, we can look at that retrospectively and analyze that and then work with the team to come up with a plan going forward for those scenarios. But, in the middle of the night, you might have that thought like, oh, I'm waking up in the middle of the night, and then there's these private equity investors that I'm paying for their beach house in Malibu. It's not a great feeling, and so ultimately, it kind of can burn out your morale if that's the case.
How does focus translate into clinical autonomy?
Well, it's important to have a management company that will highlight the importance of autonomy. And with that comes an expectation as well for the providers. We can demand autonomy from a provider standpoint, but we have to be able to deliver that, not just ask for it, but then when we get it, what do we do with it, right? It's empowering to have the autonomy to be able to take care of a patient in a full in a full arena of the anesthetic and be able to do the nerve blocks, be able to do the higher risk type lines and the high risk cases. So as a provider, it's empowering to be able to take care of people in a complete way.
I would say too, the surgeon has the relationship with the patient, obviously. And so sometimes anesthesia is viewed purely as a support role for that case that they're going to do. And they are in a support role, frankly, with the surgeon being the lead on taking care of that patient right there surgically. But it is a true team effort at that point. Anesthesia is its own specialty, just like that surgeon is their own specialty, whether they're cardiac or orthopedic or whatever. And so if we see that dynamic not playing out properly, we as the management group need to step in with the chief of surgery or with that surgeon directly and be like, hey, this anesthesia person doesn't work for you, right? You can't boss them around and tell them what to do. They are your partner with this case. They're a clinical professional as well. They've got specific things they need to check off to make sure this patient is safe before surgery. And they've got things they need to take care of during the case to make sure that patient moves through the case safely as well and has a good recovery. And so sometimes you have, a boastful surgeon that's going to say, well, this is my OR and this is the way it's going to be. But that's not really how the real world operates at this point. Anesthesia truly is its own standalone service line that works in conjunction with surgical services.
If your organization wants an anesthesia partner that's fully dedicated to one thing, anesthesia, CCI offers a singular specialized focus that larger multi-service groups simply can't match. We don't dilute our attention across radiology, urgent care, emergency medicine, hospitalists, or dozens of other service lines. We specialize exclusively in anesthesia, with on-site leadership, transparent reporting, and collaborative approach that hospitals trust. To learn how anesthesia-first partnership can support your surgeons, your scheduling efficiency, and your bottom line, visit ccianesthesia.com or connect with our leadership team for a discussion. How does specialization attract stronger clinicians?
It comes down to building the right model, the right team models for anesthesia. It can be an all-CRNA model as well, and giving them the opportunity to work at the top of their skill set. I mean, you understand anesthesia providers, they're not like people out there filling potholes in the street, watching the clock, trying to eat up the clock for the day. They want to be busy. They got into this to take care of patients. They want to be challenged. They want to have opportunities to really push themselves throughout the day. And so having a good model that keeps them busy, having a good case mix too is helpful because it helps them feel fulfilled. I mean, these are very bright people, right? They're well educated and they love what they do. And so building a model that allows them to function that way is a huge retention tool for them. And then having good leadership is critical as well. If you have a great leader that's advocating for you, a great chief that's got your back and that's helping you develop professionally as well, clinically and professionally, you feel like, okay, I love this team. I love my leader. And we have a great culture of a team here. And so there's a lot of components that go into that retention to make sure that everyone feels valued and that they feel like they can really stretch themselves throughout the day and work hard. There's going to be days that are tough and there's days that are easier. You get to go home and they balance out if you have a short day. But overall, feeling like, man, I really did some good stuff today. I took care of patients, and I have a great team to lean on when I need help with things. That makes a huge difference on retention and morale. Yeah,
and having a good case mix is very important. I always try to think of, if I'm on call, for example, anything can walk into that ER, and depending on whether you're utilized a lot in the ER or not at your specific practice, you could be called for whatever shows up. And so having that familiarity with whatever case type it might be, whether a pediatric or a trauma or, whatever it might be, maintaining that familiarity and how to care for these people that might land on your doorstep is just imperative.
How does operational support change when anesthesia is the only focus?
Well, you make sure you've got the clinical leadership in one regard. It's a big piece of it because when there are challenges in the OR, in the OR with the anesthesia services there, we need someone who has been there, has done it, or is currently doing it. Like Sean is VP of Clinical Affairs, but he's a practicing clinician. And so having those resources specialize in that area helps you tremendously. Instead of having a radiologist, for example, trying to chime in on how to fix a clinical anesthesia issue, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. And then also having the recruiting resources, because turnover happens sometimes, and you want to get perms in there as quick as possible. Having a professional team that can not only get the perms in, but can help get locums in as well, that are qualified locums, that are not going to drag down the whole team because they're a bad provider. Having those resources where people really understand the caliber provider that needs to be in there makes a huge difference.
And from a facility perspective too, the generalist management team, they may not be perfectly in tune with every single market that they're serving. So, having a finger on the pulse of anesthesia, how do we recruit? How do we retain? What's the appropriate compensation for this region? How many weeks off, or do we need to offer to draw people in? It can make a huge difference in promoting those perms to come on board.
Can you share an example of where anesthesia-only focus really changed a struggling practice?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, for instance, there was one practice where they were technically a group, but everybody was independent within that group, independent contractors. They weren't really organized under one group. It was more of a conglomerate, I guess you could call it, of individuals. And so we went in because there was no teamwork in that regard. No one had each other's back. They're all just trying to get out as quick as they could or take the best case because they were billing individually for their cases. And so what we came in and did was and it was an all anesthesiologist model. And so we put in a team model that made it operate a lot more efficiently and cost effectively, and then allowed everyone to function more seamlessly throughout the day. The surgeons didn't have to worry who was going to be in the OR for them. They weren't, because they were having to pick certain people, like, I don't like this guy, but this guy's okay or whatever. We kind of raised the bar and level set across the board as to what the expectations were in terms of patient care, in terms of quality of provider. And so surgeons could just show up and do their cases at that point. They didn't have to worry about which anesthesia provider was available. And so it made things a lot better for the surgeons, better for the patients. And then we had true leadership at that point. They had a rotation. Like it was, they do it 6 months and now it's your turn to be the chief now. And now 6 months later, it's your turn to be, like, no one was really invested in being the leader at that point. And so we recruited a true leader that had the skill set to do it, and then embraced the leadership responsibilities and made it more successful.
It sounds so obvious, but consistency is key. So many practices across the country may have varying numbers of anesthesia providers from week to week. And so they have to work with the scheduling of the operating room to know how many rooms that they can run. Well, as you can imagine, that's a huge dissatisfier to surgeons trying to get cases on, patients that have to wait in line essentially for cases. And so having that consistent number of anesthesia providers is key to having the operating room run efficiently. How many nurses do we need to staff? Block scheduling of the surgeons will add into that consistency. And then everybody can have a mindset of knowing how to, what their work week will look like.
What should clinicians look for when choosing a practice?
Well, there's location, there's pay, there's case types, autonomy. All of those things are important, and individuals have their keys that are more important to them. I would challenge the provider to seek what is most important to them, because if they're fulfilled in their personal life and what's important to them, then they're more likely to be fulfilled in the workplace. And so that's imperative for a high functioning team.
If there was one thing you wanted listeners to take away from today, what would it be?
Make sure that you have a anesthesia group that truly is a partner for you. A lot of people put partner and partnership in their marketing materials and all that kind of stuff. But are they really a partner? Are they really keeping you informed as to what's going on, both the good and the bad. There shouldn't be any surprises in administration. And so if you have a group that's really working in partnership, they're navigating those challenges, and then they're working proactively with you as well. If they know 2 new orthopedic surgeons are coming, they should be coming to you ahead of time to say, okay, here's what we're going to do to make sure you can do all those cases. They shouldn't be reacting all the time to things. They should be working proactively with you. That's what a partnership is at that point. And then if maybe you've lost a surgeon or cases are down, then they're going to come to you and say, look, you don't need all these ORs throughout the day, or you're not operating efficiently throughout the day. You've got 10 starts every morning. You really only need 8 because so many guys are cutting out early and they're just using the afternoon for clinic. And so you could probably run this with 8 ORs if you wanted to. Most groups are not going to do that because the more ORs they have, the more they can charge you for that coverage. For us, we want to be their partner and say, look, you don't really need this much coverage in your OR. And so that's being an honest and an informed partner makes a big difference for a hospital.
Yeah, I think it's important for anesthesia providers to just find an anesthesia group that allows them to practice to the absolute best of their ability, take care of patients in the best way possible, and you fulfilled the mission.
Alex and Sean, thank you for sharing your insight and your conviction. When anesthesia is the priority instead of an afterthought, clinicians feel supported, patients feel safe, workflows function smoothly, and the OR becomes a more collaborative environment. Anesthesia deserves specialized leadership because it's a specialized discipline. Thank you for listening to Unmasked. I'm Doug Simpler, and we'll see you next time. Unmasked is brought to you by CCI Anesthesia, leaders in anesthesia services for over 20 years. Subscribe to Unmasked, the CCI Anesthesia podcast today, so you never miss an episode. For more resources and information, visit the CCI Anesthesia website at ccianesthesia.com. We look forward to having you with us next time as we continue to unveil the remarkable stories and innovations shaping the future of anesthesia care. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.